may be seated. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So this is our usual slot for the Exploring Spiritual Connections, where we look a little bit more in depth, usually at something from the Siddur, or the ritual of Tefillah. But I'm going to beg your indulgence and invoke my rabbinic privilege, and we're not going to be looking at something in the Siddur today, so you're going to have to bear with me, and well, just roll with it. You're all used to my quirks. I think pretty much everybody here knows that I am a third-generation Californian, born and bred, which means the current drought in California still very much strikes home. Not just because my mother, although she's visiting, still lives in California, as does my brother and his family, but because California does still have a special place in my heart. Now, I grew up with the constant threat and realization of droughts at different times, but the current drought conditions, not necessarily just the weather, but the impact it is having on the total rundown of the reservoirs, and thanks to the increase in population, is catastrophic for the state. The state is on the brink of massive collapse and ruin because of water, which means every possible alternative is being explored. You may have heard about recent advances in desalination, and that will definitely help, coupled with the cheaper electricity that is now being available through solar power. But there's another major topic of concern in California, which is the water usage by agriculture. Because agricultural water usage still is not regulated in California, because the agriculture of California is so critical to both the state's economy as well as the entire nation, and in fact the entire world's ability to feed itself in a way that it is accustomed to. And it's that in a way that it is accustomed to that is beginning to get even more and more examination. In particular, hundreds of millions of gallons of water in California is exported every single year. Now, they don't take it and put it on big tankers and float it across the sea. But what they do is they take this hundreds and hundreds of millions of gallons of water and they turn it into alfalfa. Now, when was the last time you ate some alfalfa? Not a lot of people here who are much on alfalfa, despite little rascals. Where's the alfalfa going? What, someone say Sean Connery? What's that? China, Japan, other parts of Asia, other parts of the world as well. And they eat alfalfa in China? It's for the livestock. The hundreds and hundreds of millions of gallons of water that California is literally putting on ships and floating away goes for livestock feed around the world. That's water we never get back, except in the form of meat. Meat. A huge portion, or possibly as much as a third of the water of California, goes towards meat production and transportation. And in fact, meat itself, the livestock process and the transportation chain that goes along with it, and the methane produced by our friendly cows, is by some estimates responsible for almost half of all the greenhouse effect that we are currently experiencing from global warming. So meat is not only sucking up our water, meat is also increasing the heat conditions, which creates the drought conditions in the first place. Which is why, if you're looking for an industry to invest in right now, alternative meat sources might not be a bad bet. In fact, there has been great progress and great discussion about not just the, you may have seen the sensationalistic discussions of vat-grown meat, where they grow meat in test tubes based off muscle cells culled from animals that get cloned and created. But vegetarian meat is also getting much further along than where it has always been. Speaking as someone who is not a big fan of veggie patties, apparently they are getting really, really close to creating a vegetable meat substitute that actually tastes like meat and feels like meat in our mouth. But think for a moment of the impact then. If a third of California's water wasn't going, if half of the greenhouse gas effect wasn't being produced, we would solve two major problems in one fell swoop. But I don't know about you, but I'm not going to be a vegetarian. I do like meat. I do think meat is fun, and I do think that when done responsibly, it can be done very, very well. But think for the moment of what we could do to maybe not eliminate meat entirely from the world menu, but to simply reduce the consumption. I imagine most people probably have meat 2, maybe 3 times a week. Imagine if you took one of those meals and made it fish or vegetarian instead. And imagine if everybody did the same. Reduce just their number of current meat meals by 1/3. That would be cutting greenhouse emissions massively overnight, and it would be cutting the water usage of California massively overnight, just by changing one meal per week. That's all it takes. Now, many of us have made changes to whether we drive a hybrid or whether we get a car that has better mileage. Many of us have upgraded our air conditioners or our refrigerators or our washing machines to be more energy efficient. All of that is nickel and dime compared to the difference that can be done by changing our eating habits. Worth looking into? Worth considering? And yet, yes?
I don't understand that. When you cut down the meat consumption,
Mm-hmm.
but you're also saying that cows are the ones who are expelling methane gas.
Right. Well,
Yet, don't plants need CO2 to survive?
plants do need CO2 to survive, and the world has produced plenty of it without the industrial meat factories there to create more cows than would ever have been found in the natural setting. So it is true that the plants need CO2, and methane is actually the big thing that cows produce, which plants don't use. When we kill the cows, we are doing it to replace them. This isn't like culling something that's growing naturally in the wild, where if you kill it, it may not necessarily come back. If you buy meat, the person who sold you the meat is going to buy more in order to sell you more. It's not as though once we run through the world's resources of cows, we're done. There will constantly be more, and the more we buy, the more they grow, the more they raise, I guess I should say, which is why we're in the situation we're in. If you go back 50, 100 years ago, cows were not raised anything like in the numbers that they're currently being raised in, because people were not consuming meat at the rate that they're currently consuming it. And so, yes, we would have to eat up the current cow stock, but we can space that out, or even just let them go to pasture and live out a good cow life, and we'll be fine. But I'm not saying that we should get rid of meat production and meat eating. I am not a vegetarian, and I'm not advocating vegetarianism. That's a much longer conversation about what Torah says about vegetarianism or not. But I am guessing by the looks on your faces that many of you are considering maybe a slight adjustment, maybe a smaller portion of it. Maybe I can do a little bit here, a little bit there, just to help this situation. And yet, if I can flip for a moment, do we have that same thought process when it comes to keeping kosher? We can imagine that there is a drought in California, and therefore what I eat may make some small difference. Because after all, if I'm eating less meat, they have less need to ship alfalfa away. If I'm eating less meat, there's less methane being produced, and therefore that I can see the impact. I can understand why my decision might change something. But to not eat pork, well, that's different. That's just religion. That's not something so important. And yes, I know that I'm speaking to a large portion of the choir here, and many of you do keep kosher. But think for a moment of it in the same terms. Not of environmental protection and defense, but of spiritual enlightenment and fulfillment. But one of the biggest problems of thinking of it this way would then be if you were to make a parallel of, okay, I'm going to reduce one of my meals from meat to less in order to make an impact. What would the parallel be then for kashrut? so maybe I'm having bacon 3 times a week. This week I'm only going to have bacon twice a week. And I can judge by the looks on the faces of, that's silly. It's bacon or no bacon. You're a hypocrite for having bacon 1 less time a week and claiming you're doing it for kashrut. But you're not, and we're going to get back to that. Well, we can talk about the public institutions issues within the broader Orlando organizations another time. I want to talk about the personal choice right now, because I don't think we need to wait for institutions to make that decision for us, and with enough personal choices, the institutions would be forced to comply with it. So, is it really spiritually significant to reduce your bacon consumption by 1 portion a week and claim that you're doing it for kashrut? What about bacon? I know bacon. Okay. I'm talking about it because there are many people who are Jewish that nevertheless eat bacon. There are many people who are Jewish who nevertheless eat ham. There are many people who are Jewish who nevertheless have shrimp, who have crab or lobster, who have a nice oyster from time to time, who will have a mixture of meat and milk, whether it be a pizza with meat on the top or whether it be a meat lasagna. I know it may seem shocking, but it happens. And the question is,
Well, in the synagogue, talking about it is more shocking to me
well,
than the fact that it's being done.
but it needs to be discussed if we're going to change it. We can't pretend like it...
I'll try to listen, but I'm getting old.
Okay. God willing, I should live as long as you, and it should be completely foreign to all of us by that time. The time.
Maybe slowly change something. Like, for example, if you like always to eat shrimp, take out the shrimp for 1 month. Next month, move something, add something else in there. So instead of making a revolution, change everything, do slowly, step by step, take out every month, for example, 1 product that you used to eat that's not kosher. Also, we do for a kosher product, because of course, they reduce the price of the kosher products.
Mm-hmm.
They're very expensive. Now, in the second part of the question, okay, what is the comparison to the development? Because we say we consume less meat and less alfalfa, so we have less damage to the environment. We can say the same parallelism is if we eat more kosher, we hurt our relation with God. We make a better fruit and we strengthen our relation with God, and then what we're supposed to be our contract with you.
Exactly as Natan says, when we increase our observance of kashrut or anything else, but we're talking about kashrut right now, we increase our connection to God, which is why I'm using the spiritual connection theme for this conversation. But I'd like to add that it's not just a matter of cutting out one thing each month or something incrementally. We'll talk about that in a sec. Even a single meal where you choose to make that meal more kosher than otherwise it would have been, whether it be not putting on the chopped ham with the salad bar, right, or whether it be having the veggie pizza rather than a meat and veggie pizza. Even if tomorrow you will make a different decision that isn't kosher, that single incident is valid and valuable by itself. Every act of eating is a mitzvah waiting to happen. And just because you may not do the mitzvah right tomorrow doesn't mean you can't do it today. And just because you did it wrong yesterday doesn't mean you can't be right today. Each and every act is its own reason for keeping the laws of kashrut. And each and every, even incremental step in keeping kashrut is better than not. We often bludgeon ourselves with the word hypocrite because we don't believe that we are doing something comprehensively enough, fully enough. But you know what? God doesn't care if you're not doing it 100%. He would rather you did it 51% than 50%. And if the difference between doing 100% and 51% is doing not at all, because you don't want to call yourself a hypocrite because you're still having pork on the side even though you've cut out shrimp, you're missing the point. You are missing the process. Now, I was raised in San Diego, as I said, native Californian, and I grew up loving the sea. Not just because of what you could do playing in it, because of what you could pull out of it and eat. And I'm not just talking about fins and scales, as my daughter chanted so beautifully. I'm talking about all the things in the sea that don't have fins and scales. I grew up on a steady diet of lobster, well, not a steady diet of lobster, but the occasional lobster, but a steady diet of octopus and squid and oysters and clams. I was the 6-year-old, as my mother loves to tell the story. I was the 6-year-old who ordered oysters on the half shell when we went out to a fancy restaurant, because I loved it. I don't eat those anymore. Good, indeed. I'm sure you're all terribly relieved. But it didn't happen overnight. The process that I went through of recognizing kashrut as being a cornerstone of my own spiritual journey began when I was in my late teens. And it didn't finish for almost a decade until I finally had it where I wanted it to be, where I was observing the rules of our traditions and keeping the customs of our ancestors in a way that allows me to keep kosher. And you know what? It didn't hurt. Every little step actually felt better than before. And were there some times when I would do what was right and then maybe not do what was right the next week? Absolutely. But I continued to reflect on it and to see it as being the spiritual journey that it is, the spiritual exercise that it is. And just like exercise, just because you skip going to the gym one day doesn't mean you cancel your membership. Actually, they usually don't let you cancel your membership, but it means you go back again. And you try again, and you try a little bit more, and you stay a little bit longer on the treadmill, you use a little bit more weights, and you build and build and build until your body comes to crave the sensation from having done that exercise. And your body will come, along with your spirit, to crave keeping kashrut. To crave the sensation of knowing that what you are about to put into your mouth has been carefully selected through the laws of Torah and our tradition, and through your own spiritual discipline and determination to give a maximum boost to your own spiritual path, to your neshama. That's what eating is meant to be. Not just throwing fuel in the furnace, but putting the right fuel, chosen specially for your body. You go to the right gas station, for crying out loud, or get the right gas to put in our car. We care more about that than what we eat. But it has been selected for us with the greatest of care and the greatest of love by the greatest source of love in the entire universe. All we have to do is try, little by little by little, and you'll find your engine running cleaner, at least on a spiritual level. Don't knock it. It really does work. But you have to get past the worry of hypocrisy. You have to get past the self-abuse that I'm not doing enough, and therefore I shouldn't do anything. That I'm making a mockery of it because I've cut myself down to 2 portions instead of 3. Going to 2 from 3 means that that third meal is now a kosher meal. That is the positive. The other 2 still need work, absolutely. But you made a step in the right direction. One last thing to just use as a parallel for your own spiritual path. If someone gives $1 to tzedakah, and someone else gives $100 to tzedakah, do we say the person who only gave $1 was a hypocrite for not giving more? Do we say it's better that they've not given anything? Or do we say that helps? That dollar will make a difference. It is the same with kashrut and every other commandment within the Torah. Every time we are faced with a decision, we have a chance to enlarge our spiritual self. And every small, even seemingly inconsequential act that goes in the line of Torah and our faith makes you a bigger person in a way that doesn't affect the waist. Shabbat Shalom. And Ruth, I apologize for the strong language during the sermon.
It's okay, Reverend, I have to explain something as well, just before you go on.
Of course.
I'm a child of the Depression. There's not many of us left, but so that it was through force of financial deprivation that my parents, who were very kosher and observant of everything, found it necessary to cut some of the meals. But it was done with such beauty and understanding that it never felt like any difference.
It's a wonderful example. Page 354, we invite Rabbi Mike to lead us in our Musaf service, beginning with the Chatzi Kaddish. Page 354. Please rise as we begin together, page 357.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Eloheinu Malkeinu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Ha'adol Ha'gibor Ha'anoma, El Elyon, Kol El Chasadim Tovim, V'Korei Ha'kol, V'Zocher V'Tzeirot, U'Megido El V'Melech, V'Ma Shemo Yah, Melech
We continue privately pages 360 to 371. Still Albany, please continue at your own pace. Page 398, Kaddish Shalem. Amen. Looks like most of our youngsters have returned from leading services over at Chambrel, or now known as Brookdale. So that's very good, so they can join us on the Bima and help lead us in Ein Eloheinu on page 400. Page 402.
Amen.